The hall was quiet but full of tension. Rows of chairs were filled with people who had come to see the music competition that had a reputation for being almost impossible. The judges were sitting at the long table at the front, serious and focused, their eyes scanning the stage for every little detail. This competition was known for testing even the best musicians, and it had earned the nickname the challenge no one could beat. Many talented people had tried before, but every time the music seemed to have a mind of its own. Notes would be missed, rhythms would falter, and even the smallest mistakes made the judges shake their heads and scribble down low scores. In the back of the hall, a small figure walked quietly past the crowd, almost unnoticed. It was an 8-year-old child, carrying a tiny bag with a notebook of music sheets. The child looked calm, even though the air was filled with nervous energy from the other contestants and the audience. People whispered as they saw the young musician, some smiling kindly, some raising eyebrows in disbelief. How could someone so small and young even think about competing with the older, more experienced players? But the child paid no attention. There was no fear, only focus. There was something in the child's eyes that suggested a deep connection with music, a quiet confidence that could not be shaken. The child took a seat at the edge of the waiting area, carefully opening the music notebook and reviewing the piece to be performed. This was not a simple song or melody. It was a complex composition that had defeated many skilled musicians. Some had spent weeks, even months, preparing it, and yet the judges had always found something wrong. The notes might be played correctly, but the feeling, the emotion, the flawless timing had always been missing. The audience seemed to know this story, too. They whispered stories of past failures, and the tension grew as more contestants stepped onto the stage and tried their best. Each attempt ended with a mix of applause for the effort and frustration for the mistakes. Backstage, the child closed the notebook and took a deep breath. Fingers were pressed together, eyes closed for a brief moment, as if imagining the music in the mind before letting it flow through the hands. The parents and teachers nearby watched silently, knowing that words could not add anything to what was happening inside the young musician's mind. There was a quiet determination that seemed to fill the small body, a kind of calm that contrasted sharply with the nervous energy around. Even the other children in the competition, some older and more experienced, seemed to pause and glance at the small figure with curiosity. Could this child really do what everyone else had failed to do? As the competition continued, each contestant went up on stage, played their piece, and returned to the audience with mixed expressions. Some were proud, some disappointed, and some clearly exhausted. The judges scribbled notes, whispered among themselves, and occasionally shook their heads in disbelief. The audience grew more restless, whispering to each other about how impossible the next performance might be. Some even began to wonder if anyone would ever play the piece perfectly. The hall felt heavier with anticipation. Everyone was waiting for something extraordinary to happen, but no one seemed to believe it could happen this time. Finally, it was the child's turn. The backstage assistant called the name, and the small figure walked calmly toward the stage. Every step seemed measured, confident, and purposeful. The audience leaned forward slightly, curious and surprised at the sight of someone so young walking up to the piano. The judges watched with raised eyebrows, some exchanging looks that said, "Can this child really do it?" There was a mixture of doubt and intrigue in the air. People whispered softly, some shaking their heads, others quietly rooting for the unexpected contestant. The child approached the piano and sat down on the bench, adjusting it carefully to the perfect height. Hands hovered above the keys for a moment, and the audience could feel the silence, thick with anticipation. There was no hesitation, no sign of fear, only a quiet readiness. The child closed eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath, and then opened them with a look that suggested complete focus. The hands lowered onto the keys and the first notes began to sound. They were soft at first, delicate and precise. The melody seemed to flow naturally, as if the piano and the child were speaking the same language. The judges leaned forward, some skeptical, some intrigued. They had seen many talented musicians before, but something about this performance felt different. The notes were clear and accurate, the rhythm was steady, and there was a feeling in the music that made it hard for the audience to breathe. Each chord was played with care, each pause timed perfectly. The room seemed to hold its breath, listening to something that felt both familiar and magical. People began to whisper to their neighbors, their voices hushed with disbelief. "It's perfect. It can't be perfect." The child's fingers moved across the keys effortlessly, almost as if the music was coming from somewhere deep inside. As the piece continued, the audience and judges realized that what they were witnessing was something extraordinary. Each note matched the difficult sections of the composition flawlessly. No mistakes, no hesitation, just pure music flowing from the child's hands. The judges' pens hovered over their papers, unsure whether to write anything at all. Their previous experiences had taught them that perfection was almost impossible, yet here it was happening right in front of them. The child seemed unaware of the weight of the moment, completely absorbed in the music, letting it guide every movement. By the time the final notes sounded, there was a brief, stunned silence. The room seemed to pause, everyone caught in the awe of what had just happened. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, growing louder and louder. The judges, some still in shock, started to stand, clapping along with the audience. Some smiles of disbelief appeared, some hands reached up to cover mouths, and some eyes sparkled with tears. It was a moment of pure amazement. The child remained seated for a moment, breathing quietly, letting the applause wash over the small body. There was pride, but it was calm, humble, and genuine. People in the audience leaned toward each other, whispering excitedly, sharing what they had just witnessed. The other contestants, some older and more experienced, watched with a mixture of admiration and surprise. The child had done something no one else had been able to do. The music, which had seemed impossible, had been played flawlessly, with emotion, precision, and ease. The judges, now fully recovered from their initial shock, nodded in acknowledgement. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to respect, and their notes began to reflect the extraordinary performance. It was clear that the 8-year-old had achieved something remarkable, something that would be remembered by everyone in the hall for a long time. Backstage, the parents and teachers hugged each other quietly, smiling and shedding tears of joy. They had always known the child's talent was special, but seeing it recognized in such a public and undeniable way was overwhelming. Other adults who had doubted the young musician now shared in the astonishment, realizing that true talent sometimes comes in the smallest packages. The child stepped off the stage with a calm smile, holding the applause in the heart rather than letting it rush the mind. There was no arrogance, only a quiet joy and satisfaction that comes from achieving something extraordinary. That day, the competition would be remembered for a long time. Not for the other contestants, not for the mistakes that had been made before, but for the 8-year-old prodigy who had played the impossible piece flawlessly in seconds. It was a story that would be retold. A story of focus, determination, and natural talent that left everyone in awe. People would leave the hall that day inspired, reminded that age and size do not define skill or the ability to achieve greatness. And the child, small and humble, had become the heart of the story, a symbol of what is possible when passion and ability come together. After the first few contestants had finished their performances, the tension in the hall was thick. The audience whispered among themselves, sharing stories of past competitions and the impossibility of the piece everyone was waiting to hear. Many of the contestants had tried countless times, practicing day and night, yet the judges had always found flaws. Some missed the difficult chords, others faltered on the rapid notes, and even those with years of experience could not capture the emotion the judges demanded. Parents and teachers in the audience held their breath as they watched the younger contestants step onto the stage, hoping they would do something extraordinary, but prepared for disappointment. The 8-year-old prodigy waited quietly backstage. The child sat on a small chair, fingers tapping lightly on the notebook of music sheets, while eyes followed the performers on stage. Even though there were nervous thoughts floating in the air from the other contestants, the child's mind was calm, focused entirely on the music. There was no worry, no fear, only preparation and a sense of connection with the notes on the page. The child imagined each phrase of the music, hearing it in the mind and feeling it in the body, as if practicing in a private world where nothing else existed. Around the child, other contestants were restless. Some whispered to their friends about how young the prodigy was. Others looked on with skepticism, thinking it impossible for someone so small to handle the challenge. There was a mix of amusement and disbelief. A few of the older children even laughed softly, but they quickly stopped when they noticed the child's serious expression. There was a quiet determination that made it clear this was not a game. The child wasn't there to impress anyone. The goal was simple and pure. Play the music as it should be played. The audience felt the anticipation growing. Many had come to see a performance, but what they were witnessing backstage was the calm before the storm. Parents held their children close, whispering encouragement to each other and hoping that perhaps, for once, someone might finally succeed at the impossible piece. Judges sat at their table, pens in hand, already preparing for the inevitable mistakes that would appear. The murmurs of "no one has done it," and "it's impossible" echoed softly across the room. Everyone was bracing themselves for failure, yet no one could look away. Backstage, the child closed the notebook for a moment, pressed hands together, and breathed deeply. It was a small gesture, but it showed a ritual of focus and control. The child's mind was calm, filtering out all distractions, all doubts, and all noises of the crowd. Every note, every pause, every rhythm was rehearsed in the mind, though the child did not simply memorize the music. The child understood it, felt it, and let the feeling guide every movement. The teachers and parents watching knew this was rare. Many adults with years of training could not summon the same calm confidence under pressure. This was not just talent. It was something beyond, a natural gift that combined understanding, intuition, and the courage to face what others could not. As the next contestant took the stage, the child watched carefully. Each mistake, each hesitation was a lesson. The audience reacted politely, clapping after each performance, but there was a sense of longing for something more. The judges shook their heads at the errors, scribbled notes, and whispered to one another. It was clear that no one had yet reached the perfection that was possible in this piece. The tension grew with each passing minute, as if the hall itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone who could finally succeed. Finally, the assistant called the child's name. The sound of it seemed to cut through the murmurs, creating a moment of silence. The child stood, small and composed, and walked toward the stage. The audience leaned forward, eyes widening in curiosity and surprise. A child so young, stepping into a hall filled with older, more experienced musicians, was already extraordinary. Whispers filled the room. "Can such a young child do it?" And "no one has ever managed this before." There were glances exchanged between parents and teachers, a mix of worry and hope. Yet no one could deny the quiet confidence in the child's walk. As the child reached the piano, the audience grew still. Every eye was on the small figure adjusting the bench, hands hovering over the keys. There was a moment of stillness, a pause before the music began, as if the entire room was waiting for a single breath to be taken. The child's eyes closed briefly, taking in the silence and letting it fill the mind. This was the calm before action, the quiet moment when preparation met opportunity. Fingers lowered gently onto the keys, and the first notes sounded. Soft, precise, and full of intention, they filled the hall with a melody that seemed to float in the air. The judges leaned forward, pens paused in midair. They had seen many performances before, and most ended in disappointment. But something was different this time. The notes were clean, the timing perfect, and the emotion in the music was unmistakable. The child was not just playing the notes correctly but interpreting the music in a way that touched everyone present. Audience members exchanged looks of astonishment, some mouths opening slightly in awe. It was hard to believe that such a small child could command the stage with this level of skill. As the music continued, the tension in the hall transformed into fascination. Each passage was handled with care, every difficult section executed flawlessly. The judges' expressions shifted from skepticism to amazement. They whispered quietly to each other, unable to contain their surprise. The audience, too, began to feel the emotion of the piece, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes to savor the sound. The child's hands moved effortlessly across the keys, fingers pressing and releasing with precision and grace. Every note seemed to be perfectly timed, as if the child had become one with the piano. The impossible piece that had defeated everyone else was unfolding beautifully, with clarity and emotion. People in the hall began to hold their breath as the performance approached the most challenging sections. These were the parts that had caused past failures, the moments where other musicians had faltered. Yet the child played on, not rushed, not hesitant, with a control that was breathtaking. The judges scribbled notes, but there were no corrections, no markings to indicate error. Some even stopped writing, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The audience was silent now, entirely captivated by the unfolding brilliance. It was rare to see talent like this, and rarer still to see it so young, so pure, and so confident. When the final notes rang out, there was a moment of quiet that felt suspended in time. The hall seemed to hold its breath, absorbing the perfection it had just heard. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, then growing into a roar. The judges rose to their feet, some shaking their heads in disbelief, some clapping slowly, letting the moment sink in. People around the room were smiling, some with tears in their eyes, others nodding in respect. The child remained seated for a moment, letting the applause wash over quietly, a humble acknowledgement of achievement without boasting. It was a moment of triumph, but it was calm, not loud or exaggerated. The child's satisfaction came from having done something extraordinary, not from seeking recognition. Backstage, the parents and teachers hugged quietly, sharing tears and smiles. They had always known the child's talent was remarkable, but seeing it recognized in such a public and undeniable way was overwhelming. Other children in the competition, who had been skeptical, watched with admiration, realizing that age and size did not determine ability. The story of the prodigy was spreading quickly through whispers in the hall. Everyone seemed to be talking about the calm confidence, the flawless performance, and the emotion behind the music. This was not just a child playing notes. It was a child telling a story through music, capturing hearts and minds. After the applause died down, the judges spoke to the audience, acknowledging the incredible performance. Their words were full of respect, some tinged with disbelief, but all sincere. They praised the child's talent, focus, and ability to play a piece that had never been played perfectly before. Audience members continued to clap, some standing, some whispering their astonishment to neighbors. The child, small but radiant, bowed slightly, a simple gesture of gratitude, and stepped off the stage. It was a quiet, dignified moment that contrasted with the excitement around. The child returned to the waiting area, eyes shining with joy and pride. There was relief, but it was calm and reflective. No words could fully express what had just happened. Parents and teachers gathered around, sharing embraces and quiet congratulations. Other contestants, even the older ones, came over to offer smiles and handshakes, acknowledging the extraordinary achievement. There was respect in every glance, a recognition that this performance would be remembered for years to come. As the day continued, people in the hall continued to talk about the prodigy. Whispers of awe, surprise, and admiration filled the room. Stories of past attempts, failures, and struggles were revisited, now with a new perspective. The impossible had been accomplished. The child had not just played the music correctly, but had infused it with a feeling that made it unforgettable. For the audience, the judges, the parents, and even the other contestants, it was a lesson in focus, talent, and courage. It showed that greatness could come from the youngest and least expected places, and that sometimes extraordinary ability does not wait for age or experience to make its presence known. By the end of the day, the hall had transformed. What had begun as a place of skepticism and tension became a space filled with inspiration. The performance of the 8-year-old prodigy would be talked about for a long time, not just for its technical perfection but for the courage and calm with which it was delivered. Everyone left with the sense that they had witnessed something rare and beautiful, something that proved that age and size do not define true skill. And for the young musician, the day was a quiet celebration of focus, talent, and the pure joy of creating something unforgettable. The moment the child stepped onto the stage, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was on the small figure approaching the piano, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation in the audience. The judges leaned forward slightly, their pens paused in midair, as though preparing for the usual mistakes they expected to see. This was the performance that everyone had been waiting for, the one no one believed could be done perfectly. The child walked with calm steps, each movement purposeful, eyes fixed on the piano as if it were a friend rather than an instrument. There was no fear, no hesitation, only focus. The child adjusted the bench, straightened posture, and let hands hover just above the keys, waiting for the perfect moment. A hush fell over the audience. Parents gripped the hands of their children, some leaning forward, eager to see what would happen. Contestants who had just stepped off the stage watched with wide eyes, feeling a mix of awe and disbelief. The child closed the eyes for a brief moment, taking in the silence, listening to the faint rustle of papers, the shifting of feet, and the quiet murmurs that echoed softly. It was a moment of preparation, a pause where the world seemed to shrink down to the piano and the music alone. Then, with a slow breath, the eyes opened, and the hands lowered onto the keys. The first notes emerged, soft but clear. The melody started gently, each tone precise and intentional, filling the room with a calm, flowing sound. The audience leaned in unconsciously, captivated by the clarity and confidence in the playing. It was more than just hitting the right notes. There was a feeling behind each one, a subtle movement of emotion that made the music alive. The judges scribbled quickly, though their expressions betrayed surprise, some leaning back in their chairs as they realized that this performance was unlike anything they had seen before. The child's hands moved effortlessly, fingers gliding over the keys with ease and accuracy. Every note, every chord, every pause was perfect, almost as if the piano itself had been waiting for these small hands to bring it to life. As the music unfolded, the audience and judges began to notice the complexity of what was happening. This piece was known for its difficulty, for sections where even adults with years of training had stumbled. Yet the child played on, confident and steady, never rushing, never hesitating. Each challenging passage was handled with precision, every rapid note clean and controlled. The melody flowed naturally, rising and falling in perfect harmony with the intended rhythm. People in the hall whispered to each other, astonished by what they were hearing. "It can't be real," some said, while others nodded in quiet agreement, unable to believe that someone so young could produce such perfection. The child's focus never wavered. There was no awareness of the audience or the judges, no recognition of the skeptical glances or astonished expressions. It was as though the music had become a world of its own, a private space where only the child and the piano existed. Every movement was guided by instinct and understanding, not just practice. Fingers moved with grace, hands adjusting subtly to the shape of the keys, the body swaying slightly to follow the rhythm. The expression on the child's face was calm, almost serene, conveying concentration but not strain. The audience could feel the connection between mind, body, and instrument, a rare sight that made hearts race and eyes widen. The judges began to exchange looks, silent acknowledgement passing between them. They had seen countless talented performers, some who had mastered the technical aspects, others who could convey emotion, but rarely had they witnessed both together at this level. The child was combining precision with feeling, speed with grace, technique with soul. Some judges scribbled notes furiously, trying to capture the moment, while others simply watched, holding their pens but unable to write fast enough to keep up. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of the music, a shared experience of wonder and astonishment. As the child moved into the most difficult parts of the piece, the audience leaned forward collectively, holding their breath. These were the sections that had broken the confidence of past performers, where chords tangled and rhythms faltered. Yet the child navigated them effortlessly, fingers flying across the keys with clarity and speed. Every note hit the mark perfectly, every pause calculated and deliberate. The judges' expressions shifted from skepticism to admiration, some shaking their heads as if to reassure themselves that they were truly seeing what they thought they were seeing. Even the older contestants, who had watched from the sidelines, felt a mixture of awe and humility. It was impossible not to be affected by the purity and skill of the performance. The child's face showed a calm joy, not arrogance, but a satisfaction in the act of creating something beautiful. Each phrase of music flowed into the next seamlessly, the story of the composition coming alive in a way that was both technical and emotional. The audience could feel the ebb and flow, the tension and release, the energy moving through the hall like a wave. Some closed their eyes to savor it fully, others whispered to their neighbors, words of disbelief and admiration spilling softly into the quiet air. Every listener was caught in the spell of the music, experiencing a moment that felt larger than life, a shared wonder that was almost tangible. By the time the child reached the final passages, a sense of climax had built in the hall. The judges sat up straighter, eyes wide, and pens hovering, unable to stop watching. The audience seemed to lean collectively closer, their hearts racing in unison with the final notes. The piece required a delicate balance between speed, control, and emotion, and every movement of the child's hands and fingers demonstrated mastery. The room was filled with an almost electric energy, a sense that everyone present was witnessing something historic. Even those who had doubted the child's ability felt a rush of awe and admiration, unable to deny the extraordinary talent in front of them. Then came the final notes. They rang out clearly, each one resonating with perfect timing and expression. For a brief moment, the hall was silent, as if holding its breath to fully absorb the perfection it had just witnessed. The judges' pens paused, midair, and the audience sat frozen, some with tears in their eyes, some with mouths slightly open in disbelief. It was a moment of pure astonishment, a collective realization that the impossible had been done. The 8-year-old Prodigy had played the piece flawlessly, bringing life and feeling to every note, every pause, every chord. Slowly, the room erupted into applause. It started as polite claps, then grew into a thunderous standing ovation. The judges, now fully recovered from their initial shock, stood, some clapping slowly, some with hands raised, faces filled with respect and amazement. The audience cheered, some stamping their feet, others whistling in admiration. The child remained seated for a moment, taking in the applause quietly, a calm smile on the face, letting the moment settle in the heart rather than seeking attention. It was a humble acknowledgement of achievement, a simple, graceful response to a truly extraordinary accomplishment. Backstage, parents and teachers hugged each other quietly, tears of joy running down their faces. They had known the child's talent was remarkable, but seeing it recognized in such a public and undeniable way was overwhelming. Other contestants, even older and more experienced, came forward to shake hands and offer congratulations. Respect and admiration filled the room, replacing skepticism and doubt. The child's performance had not only impressed but inspired, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it. The judges, finally able to speak, praised the child openly, acknowledging the mastery, focus, and emotional depth of the performance. Their words carried weight, for they had seen many talented performers but rarely encountered someone who could combine technical skill with feeling so naturally. Audience members continued to cheer, some standing, some whispering to friends, all sharing in the awe of what had just occurred. The child stepped off the stage with calm dignity, bowing slightly, a gesture of thanks without seeking praise. It was a moment of pure, quiet triumph, the kind that leaves a mark not only on those who witness it but also on the performer's own memory. As the hall emptied and people spoke excitedly of what they had seen, the story of the 8-year-old Prodigy began to spread. Teachers and parents shared the details with friends, other musicians talked about the rare talent, and contestants carried with them a renewed sense of possibility. The performance was not only a technical achievement, but also an emotional journey that had touched hearts and inspired minds. Everyone present knew that they had witnessed something rare, something that would be remembered for years, a moment where skill, courage, and focus came together to achieve what had been thought impossible. The child returned to the waiting area, hands still slightly shaking from the excitement, eyes bright with satisfaction. There was relief, yes, but it was calm and reflective, a quiet acknowledgement of having met the challenge perfectly. Parents and teachers gathered around, sharing embraces, smiles, and gentle words of pride. The other contestants, some still in awe, offered nods of respect, acknowledging the extraordinary accomplishment. Conversations buzzed quietly with admiration and wonder, each person processing the performance in their own way. For the young musician, the day was not about recognition but about the pure joy of music, the fulfillment of a goal achieved, and the quiet satisfaction of having turned an impossible challenge into a moment of beauty and perfection. The story of that performance would live on, told and retold by all who had witnessed it. It was a reminder that talent and focus do not wait for age, that courage can come in small packages, and that extraordinary ability often reveals itself in the most unexpected places. The 8-year-old Prodigy had not only played the impossible piece but had done so with grace, humility, and brilliance, leaving a mark on everyone's heart and a memory that would last a lifetime. The final notes lingered in the air, vibrating softly as the hall absorbed the music that had just been played. For a moment, there was silence so complete it seemed to stretch time. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, almost as if people were checking to see if what they had heard was real. Slowly, it grew louder and stronger, spreading through the audience like a wave. Hands clapped together, some stamped the floor with excitement, and voices cheered. The judges, still in shock from witnessing perfection, began to rise one by one, clapping and nodding with expressions of amazement. Some covered their mouths in disbelief. Others shook their heads slowly, unable to fully grasp that the impossible had been accomplished. The energy in the room shifted from tension and anticipation to pure admiration and celebration. The 8-year-old Prodigy remained seated for a moment, letting the applause wash over quietly. There was no exaggerated reaction, no need for fanfare. The satisfaction came from having played the piece flawlessly, from the feeling that every note, every chord, every pause had been exactly right. A calm smile spread across the child's face, reflecting pride and joy, yet it was quiet and genuine, a humble acknowledgement of achievement. For those watching, it was a rare glimpse of someone completely absorbed in their craft, experiencing both the thrill of success and the serenity of mastery at the same time. Parents and teachers who had watched nervously from backstage now approached, their faces full of tears, smiles, and disbelief. Hugs were shared quietly, hands patted on small shoulders, whispers of pride and love exchanged. They had known the child's talent was extraordinary, but seeing it recognized in such a public and undeniable way was overwhelming. Some wiped away tears, others shook their heads, murmuring words like, "I can't believe it," and "This is incredible." The warmth of their support and admiration was a soft cocoon around the child, providing comfort and affirmation without needing to overshadow the quiet triumph of the performance. Other contestants, many older and more experienced, watched with mixed emotions. Some smiled genuinely, offering small gestures of respect like nods or pats on the back. Others were speechless, caught between awe and humility, realizing that the performance they had witnessed would set a new standard for what was possible. There was a shared understanding among them that this was no ordinary talent. It was rare, remarkable, and perhaps once in a lifetime. Even those who had previously doubted the child's abilities could not hide the admiration that now filled their eyes. In a quiet way, it was a moment of inspiration for them as well, showing that age and size do not define true skill. Back on stage, the judges gathered, their expressions slowly softening from disbelief to respect. They began to speak to the audience, praising the child openly and sincerely. Words like extraordinary, unbelievable, and mastery beyond years floated through the room. Some judges even shared their astonishment privately with each other, marveling at how a single person, so young, could bring the impossible piece to life with such clarity and emotion. Their acknowledgement carried weight, not just because of their expertise, but because they had witnessed perfection that they had thought impossible to achieve. The applause continued to echo, growing louder as the audience joined in the celebration, clapping and cheering in unison. The child stepped off the stage with calm dignity, bowing slightly to the audience and judges. It was a gesture of gratitude, simple and understated, reflecting the humility that had marked the entire performance. The child's small hands rested lightly at the sides, eyes shining with joy and relief. There was a quiet acknowledgement of accomplishment, a satisfaction that did not need to be shouted or displayed dramatically. Backstage, friends, family, and teachers gathered around, offering embraces, pats, and quiet words of praise. It was a moment of connection, of shared pride and love, a reminder that even in extraordinary achievement, human support and encouragement play a vital role. As the applause began to fade, conversations erupted throughout the hall. People were talking excitedly, exchanging looks of astonishment, retelling the details of the performance to neighbors and friends. Some were replaying the moments in their minds, trying to capture the feeling of perfection that had unfolded before them. Others were quietly reflecting, realizing that they had witnessed something rare, a performance that would be remembered for years. The story of the child's achievement was spreading quickly, whispered conversations turning into eager discussions as the significance of what had happened sank in. Even those who had come to the competition simply to watch passed along their amazement to anyone who would listen, sharing the wonder of a young talent that had defied expectation. The child returned to the waiting area, greeted by parents, teachers, and close friends who shared smiles, hugs, and quiet congratulations. There was a sense of calm joy in the room, a shared understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The young musician's focus remained intact, a quiet reflection of the dedication and effort that had made the moment possible. Conversations buzzed around gently, but the child listened with a serene smile, appreciating the words without letting them overwhelm the moment. It was a balance of recognition and humility, a graceful handling of admiration that reflected both maturity and youth. As the judges completed their evaluations, they spoke to the audience once more, explaining the significance of the flawless performance. Their words highlighted not just the technical mastery, but the emotional depth, the confidence, and the focus that had brought the music to life. They acknowledged the years of preparation that had made such skill possible, as well as the natural talent that had allowed the child to perform at this level with ease. The audience listened intently, their appreciation deepening as they understood the dedication and ability behind what they had witnessed. It was not just a performance. It was a demonstration of what human effort, talent, and focus could accomplish, even against seemingly impossible challenges. Meanwhile, the other contestants observed quietly, some reflecting on their own performances, some inspired by what they had just seen. There was a sense of camaraderie developing, a shared acknowledgement that the standard had been raised and that everyone could learn from the example set by the young prodigy. Even those who had initially doubted the child's ability were now among the most vocal in their admiration, offering words of respect and encouragement. The energy of the room shifted from competition to inspiration, from skepticism to possibility, as people realized that age, experience, and size were not barriers to greatness. Outside the stage, the buzz of the day continued. Parents and teachers spoke of the child's dedication and focus, recalling long hours of practice, early mornings, and late nights spent mastering the music. They celebrated the combination of effort and talent that had made the moment possible, emphasizing that the performance was the result of both innate skill and hard work. The audience shared these stories, connecting with the human journey behind the performance, recognizing that the achievement was not just technical but deeply personal and inspiring. It became clear that this was a story that would be remembered, shared, and celebrated long after the competition ended. The child, sitting quietly with family and teachers, reflected on the performance in a personal way. There was a sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride in having faced the challenge and succeeded. The joy was not loud or boastful. It was calm, centered, and deeply satisfying. The focus that had carried the child through practice and preparation had remained strong through the performance, and the result was a demonstration of capability and courage. The child's eyes sparkled with the understanding that the music had been brought to life exactly as intended, and the connection with the audience had been real and immediate. It was a rare, perfect alignment of talent, preparation, and opportunity. As the day drew to a close, the story of the performance spread beyond the hall. Teachers and parents shared news with friends and colleagues, contestants told their peers, and the judges' remarks circulated throughout the community. It became a symbol of inspiration, proof that determination, focus, and natural ability could overcome even the toughest challenges. The 8-year-old Prodigy's performance was no longer just a moment in a competition. It was a story that reminded everyone present that greatness can come from the most unexpected places and that age is not a limitation to achievement. The final moments backstage were filled with quiet celebration. Parents and teachers exchanged looks of pride, contestants offered handshakes and nods, and the young musicians soaked in the calm satisfaction of accomplishment. It was a moment of shared humanity, where the joy of achievement, the recognition of effort, and the admiration of talent all came together. Conversations continued, laughter bubbled softly, and the room was filled with a sense of community and respect. Everyone understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that would remain in memory for years, and that the young musician had achieved something remarkable not just technically, but emotionally and humanly. By the end of the day, the hall emptied slowly, but the story of the 8-year-old Prodigy remained alive in the minds of all who had witnessed it. The judges, the audience, the contestants, and the family members carried with them the memory of perfection achieved with calm, focus, and humility. The child's performance had not only met the impossible challenge but had also left a lasting impression of inspiration, proving that true talent can shine regardless of age or size. The achievement was a reminder that with dedication, focus, and heart, extraordinary things are possible, and sometimes, greatness reveals itself in the most unexpected and inspiring ways. Days after the performance, the story of the 8-year-old Prodigy spread quickly. The hall where the competition had taken place was already quiet now, but people could not stop talking about what they had witnessed. Articles appeared online, social media posts shared clips of the performance, and friends and families told one another the tale with awe. The child's flawless execution and calm confidence became the focus of admiration everywhere. It was not just about playing the notes correctly. It was about the emotion, the maturity, and the talent that had been displayed in a way that left people inspired and speechless. Teachers and mentors spoke about the dedication and effort that had led to such a remarkable performance. They described the long hours of practice, the early mornings and late nights, and the intense focus that the child had maintained throughout. Yet they also emphasized that there was something innate, something natural, that allowed the child to connect with the music so deeply. It was a rare combination of skill, focus, and passion that could not be taught entirely but could be nurtured. Those who had witnessed the performance felt they had seen something unique, a glimpse of a talent that could grow to achieve great things in the future. Friends and peers of the child were inspired in their own ways. Young musicians who had been struggling with their own pieces began practicing with renewed energy, dreaming of reaching the same level of mastery. Even older students and experienced performers spoke of the performance with admiration, realizing that talent and dedication were not bound by age or experience. Teachers noticed that students were approaching music with a new sense of possibility, encouraged by the idea that someone so young could achieve something that others had thought impossible. The judges of the competition continued to talk about the child's performance long after the event. They reflected on the technical precision, the flawless timing, and the emotion that had made the performance extraordinary. Some of them mentioned it to colleagues, others in interviews, calling it one of the most remarkable performances they had ever witnessed. Even those who were normally strict and reserved found themselves admitting that the child's ability had left them awestruck. The performance became a benchmark, a reference point for skill and excellence that would influence how future competitions were judged. In the weeks that followed, opportunities opened up for the young musician. Invitations to perform in recitals, festivals, and special events arrived from all directions. Yet the child and family remained grounded, careful to choose experiences that were meaningful and enriching rather than simply seeking attention. The focus remained on learning, enjoying the music, and growing in skill and confidence. Teachers continued to guide, providing lessons and encouragement, helping the child refine technique and expression while nurturing the love of music that had always been at the heart of every practice session. At home, practice became a joy rather than a chore. Each session was filled with curiosity and excitement, with the child exploring new pieces, experimenting with interpretation, and deepening understanding of rhythm, tone, and emotion. Parents and family watched quietly, providing support, encouragement, and love without adding pressure. The child's confidence grew naturally, fueled by the joy of creating music and the recognition that talent and hard work could accomplish extraordinary things. Friends who visited for playdates or lessons often found themselves drawn to the piano, eager to watch, learn, and be inspired. Schools and music programs took notice of the young musician as well. Invitations to speak at workshops, participate in special demonstrations, or even mentor other young students started to come in. Yet, despite the attention, the child remained humble, focused on learning and enjoying each performance rather than seeking applause. Teachers and mentors remarked on the maturity and poise displayed, noting that the child had the rare ability to balance achievement with humility. It was a combination that made the story not only remarkable but genuinely inspiring for anyone who learned about it. The impact on the audience who had attended the competition was lasting. Many spoke about how the performance had shifted their understanding of talent and potential. Some adults reflected on their own lives, realizing that courage and focus could lead to accomplishments they had once thought beyond reach. Children in the audience were motivated, encouraged by the example of someone their age achieving what they thought impossible. The story spread from person to person, building a quiet legacy of inspiration, reminding everyone that greatness can emerge unexpectedly, and that age is not a limit to ability. As time went on, videos of the performance continued to circulate online. Viewers from different cities, countries, and backgrounds watched with wonder, sharing their reactions and spreading the story further. Comments praised the child's talent, calm confidence, and emotional connection to the music. Many parents shared the videos with their own children, hoping to inspire them, while teachers used them in lessons to demonstrate precision, emotion, and dedication. The story became more than a single event. It became a teaching tool, an example, and a source of motivation for countless aspiring musicians. The child's journey continued quietly, with each new piece of music approached with the same focus and dedication as before. Lessons, practice, and performances became stepping stones, each one a chance to learn and grow. Despite recognition and praise, the joy of playing remained central. The music was not about fame or approval, but about expression, connection, and the thrill of creating something beautiful. Family, teachers, and mentors supported every step, reminding the child that the love of music was the most important reward. The community that had witnessed the performance began to celebrate the story in small but meaningful ways. Schools invited the child to demonstrate techniques, music shops highlighted the achievement, and local events honored the remarkable talent. People talked about the performance as a moment that reminded them of the power of focus, courage, and natural ability. The 8-year-old Prodigy had not only achieved personal success, but had also inspired a network of people to believe in potential, hard work, and dedication. The legacy of that performance continued to grow. Even months later, the story was shared in classrooms, music programs, and homes. Each retelling emphasized not just the flawless execution but the calm confidence, focus, and joy that had made it extraordinary. Young musicians who had once felt limited by age or experience now saw that talent could emerge at any time, that dedication and courage could transform the impossible into reality. The child's story became a symbol of hope, inspiration, and the limitless possibilities that come with belief, preparation, and heart. Over time, the child performed in more recitals, concerts, and special events, each experience building skill, confidence, and joy. Teachers guided with patience and encouragement, parents provided steady support, and the community watched with admiration and pride. Yet, despite growing recognition and attention, the core remained the same: a love of music, a dedication to craft, and the quiet joy of creating something extraordinary. Each performance reinforced the lesson that talent paired with focus and courage could overcome challenges that once seemed insurmountable. The story of the 8-year-old Prodigy's performance became more than a tale of a single competition. It became a story about human potential, about how preparation, focus, and passion could create moments of wonder and inspiration. It reminded everyone that skill can emerge in unexpected places and that age is never a limitation. Musicians, students, teachers, and parents shared the story as a source of hope and motivation. A demonstration that with dedication and heart, extraordinary accomplishments are possible. Years later, people would still talk about the day the impossible piece was played flawlessly in seconds by a child who seemed too young to succeed. It was a story that crossed generations, inspiring young musicians to practice harder, encouraging parents to support their children's dreams, and reminding everyone that courage, talent, and focus could create moments that change lives. The child's journey continued, filled with music, learning, and joy. But the memory of that first extraordinary performance remained a touchstone of possibility and inspiration. It was a story that proved that the extraordinary can come from the smallest and most unexpected places, and that sometimes greatness reveals itself quietly, humbly, and brilliantly, leaving a lasting mark on the world.